Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of AIESEC in Sri Lanka Vodcast with IFS, the nation's first podcast on development of youth leadership. So talking about AIESEC, AIESEC is an international youth-run organization that is spread around 200 countries across the world. And the Sri Lankan chapter of AIESEC is spread around in 20 universities across the island, developing youth leaders and self-driven leaders for their self-development. Then talking a bit about IFS. IFS is one of the most prominent IT companies in Sri Lanka, which develops and delivers cloud-based enterprise software solutions to companies all across the globe. IFS currently has over 5,000 employees all across the world and over 2,500 employees in Sri Lanka. So what is self-leadership? This is what we are going to talk about in this episode. So for today's episode, we had an interesting and amazing individual, Mr. Fahad Farook. So talking about Mr. Fahad Farook, he's an international trainer, certified transformative coach, and development specialist. Hi, how are you doing?
I'm very good. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. And I'm Prashant Gunawardana, the podcast director for AIESEC in Sri Lanka National Showcasing Team. So let's move on to the podcast, and probably our viewers right here are wondering what is self-leadership. So I'm going to shoot on you the first question, which is ideally what is self-leadership and what the viewers can actually grasp out of it, what they can really understand out of what self-leadership is.
Well, an important thing to understand that when it comes to this word leadership, we always assume that you have to have followers to be a leader. There needs to be people that you have to give leadership to. But this aspect of self-leadership is a little bit different. It's an extension of, let's say, self-ownership. Especially in the Sri Lankan context from smaller days, independence is not something that is given to us. We're always taught to, when you're small, listen to your parents and then listen to your teachers because elders always know best. And there's very little space for young people to express themselves, to ask questions. Oftentimes, I'm sure all of us have heard this, they will say, well, listen to your adults, kind of thing. And then this, kid grows up and then they go into the world and suddenly they are expected to take responsibility. They're expected to show leadership, all these things. And people are like, how do I do these things? I don't know. But this aspect of self-leadership is about understanding that you have to take control of you without waiting for somebody to tell you what to do, because that's what we're used to. Do what your parents tell you, do what your teachers tell you, you go to work, do what your bosses tell you. But at no point in your life has somebody, or maybe they have, if they have, you're very lucky, given you that chance to say, hey, think for yourself, do for yourself, take those chances, take those small risks in a controlled environment. So in a sense, self-leadership is understanding, hey, can I take ownership, can I take responsibility for me and put into action different things with self-discipline in order to get where I need to go. Also understanding that there is a risk. That means, you have to take responsibility. There's nobody for you to blame, or I did it because you told me, nothing like that. So it's about understanding that, hey, am I going to take control for things that I want? Am I going to try to action those things? Am I going to have ownership for it? Am I going to have self-discipline for it? And understand that, hey, මට plan එකක් තියෙනවාද මට අවශ්‍ය දේවල් කරගන්න to go to that place. So in a very broad nutshell, self-leadership doesn't require the people. It's all about, can you try to control this for things that you want?
It's more like about what you do for yourself out there without anyone's influence.
Not without anyone's influence. That's what we should always ask for advice, ask for insight, ask for input. But we can't wait all the time for direction. We can't wait saying, tell me what to do and I will do it. No, that isn't self.
It's more like going out of your comfort zone a bit.
Absolutely. It's a big comfort zone for lots of people, lots of young people in Sri Lanka, because they're afraid. They don't know how. So definitely going outside your comfort zone, but that doesn't mean to think like a poor and be like, it's not like that, but it's about being smart. Taking those inputs from people who are, maybe more experienced than you, and then you're trying to put all those inputs to consciously craft a decision with all those inputs that you have. Yeah.
So it's like many key elements together build self-leadership within you.
100%, absolutely.
Yeah. Like what kind of elements we should have within ourselves, to develop self-leadership within oneself?
So if somebody's thinking, okay, great, how am I going to create this, right? First one, self-awareness. Do you know who you are? Like, do you know what your preferences are? Do you know what you like, what you don't like, right? Do you know what motivates you? Do you know what ticks you off, right? A lot of the time, we don't know us. So first, you have to identify who you are. And that goes beyond things like, what's my favorite food? It goes into spaces like, how does my mind work? Because all things about us aren't good things, right? We have better mix of good and bad. So what are my not so great qualities, right? What are the things that I know that if things happen like this, I'm going to react like this, right? So first understand who you are. So self-awareness is number one. Number two, it's about having a sense of ownership for your goals, right? So once you identify your goals, whatever they may be, once you identify, okay, this is where I want to go, this is what I want to do, can you have a sense of ownership to say, then Tayana, I am willing to do some work, right? I'll give you a simple example, right? Somebody might say, hey, I want to study and I can be lazy. Tell me something to get over my laziness. And when I hear a question like that, I'm like, what do you even mean, Matt? Like, if you want to study and you know you're lazy, some external dude is not going to like, that doesn't make sense to me. I mean, I understand there are tools and techniques you can use, but that's where self-leadership and ownership comes in. Like, if you know, then self-leadership is about identifying, make a mugger and over it. If I know, but amazing, then what can I do in order for that to not happen? We wait for somebody else to tell us how not, but that doesn't work, right? So going back to the points we were making without digressing too much, number one is self-awareness, second one is a sense of ownership, but third one is mostly keeping it real, right? Just checking yourself. Sometimes you're wrong, sometimes you're right, having an open mindset, always waiting for the inputs. Sometimes you might think, I get hurt. Check yourself and cut. Sometimes you might think, I rarely listen to other people, I just do whatever. So check yourself. Sometimes you might think, okay, I only want direction or input. Check yourself. It's about crafting a personality that has that balance. But it's something that you can work on, right? So if we go back to the points in order, we're talking about, self-awareness, sense of ownership, and being real with yourself. But all of this comes together with discipline, right? Discipline of the mind. But a lot of people think that, hey, I don't have a motivation, I don't have a push, and what you need to understand is motivation and, that little push is only kickstarters. You need to have discipline for anything you do. And discipline means not just being good all the time. It means constant consistency in trying to get to a certain place. And that requires a self-leadership. Right? Say you want to work out, you want to go to the gym, and you don't have the discipline to go to the gym. Then use some self-leadership and put it in your mind, right? Mama giye nattang wena kawda yanne, right? Mama giye nattang kawda wena tandu karan. That is not self-leadership, right? So controlling you at the core with discipline, with being real, with a sense of ownership, with a sense of awareness, those are great places to start. So I'll ask you some questions you can start asking yourself. Very simple. Do I know me? Mama Mawadan. Right? Do I know what I want? It's okay if you don't specifically know what you want, but a general direction of what you want, right? Then do I know my weak points? Right? And finally, do I have the discipline to work on these every single day, every single moment?
Exactly. I think that's what most of the youth in Sri Lanka lacks as well, because the team point is actually absolutely on point, because I think most of the youth, they start something, but they don't have the discipline to be consistent and continue with it. So I think what I understood is like self-leadership is very much required for you to be a leader out there as well. First, you need to have self-leadership, then you can be a great leader. You can be the change maker, basically.
If you can't lead yourself, how can you lead others?
Exactly. Precisely. So, yeah. And also, I want to know, like, I think our viewers right there also want to know how we can develop now with all those elements that you told. Like, is there any process or is there any connection with regards to help, support, guidance that you can gain? Maybe some certain tips, some certain books that you can look into, some certain people you can look up to. Like certain guiding force or guiding materials that you could definitely put out there for you to know or learn about.
So I'm really reluctant to talk about guiding or people to look up to, because one thing we need to acknowledge is that every single person is absolutely different.
Exactly.
And there is never a one size fits all. As a society, the world is very good at saying, "Me pota kiyawanna, meyawa gamana karanna," or read this book, try to be like this person, or follow this framework. And you have to wonder why people rarely follow through with things like that, right? That's because everybody has to discover what works for them. So one of the things that I think is like a blanket piece of advice is try and understand how still your mind is. Right? Try and understand how much noise you have inside your head. Mm-hmm. Right? If you can figure out a way to reduce the noise in your head, then whether that framework is going to be conversation with a coach, or whether that's going to be reading a book, or whether it's going to be following a process, that will be easier for you to find or follow, right? You want to find models for self-leadership or self-discipline, the internet is full of it. Go and search. That you can word search and that's fine. But what I think is the first step for putting into daily action is making your mind still, making your mind quiet, right? In line with that, there's one book that I will recommend that you should read. It's called Stillness is the Key by Ryan Holiday. Mm-hmm. Read it because it mixes aspects of Buddhism, it mixes aspects of Stoicism, and it has a lot of different examples. And you might think, what has stillness got to do with self-leadership? I think stillness and keeping your mind focused in one place and quietening out all these, chaos around you is a great way to cultivate self-discipline, self-awareness, which we need to self-leadership.
All right. That's pretty interesting because I love how you portrayed that actually each individual is very unique. And we are supposed to, have that fish or blanket kind of an attitude when developing self-leadership. So that's really great. And moving on, what do you think Sri Lanka needs specifically? I feel they lack a bit of self-leadership time to time. What do you think is putting a barrier between having self-leadership within them?
When you say Sri Lankan youth, I'm sure most of you watching, if you think of a place where you see the worst of people, the platform that comes to mind is Facebook, right? I'm not going to use the word youth, but people. Because you would see people saying things, acting without a sense of consequence. And I heard anybody else say anybody without a sense of thinking, me කියන එකේ පළයක් තියනවාද, me කියන එකෙන් is there, that kind of thing. So if we look at a place like Facebook where people are interacting that way, why are people not interacting that way on LinkedIn? Because it's different on LinkedIn. It's the same people on both platforms. So that tells me that the mind is deciding, right? So the same, let's say a Sri Lankan, even an adult, who drives in a very bad way in Sri Lanka, who crosses the road anywhere, goes to a country that has great road discipline, will drive with discipline. He'll cross the road at the crossing, right? So the same person is capable of acting both ways. Okay. So this tells me that everybody's brain, or most people's brains, are capable of understanding මෙහෙම හැසිරෙන්න එක හොඳයි, මෙහෙම හැසිරෙනවට වඩා. So why do they not? Why would they decide to, be a certain way? Why would they decide to just be a perceived negative way? It's because they feel like, so what? People that are so what? So what? And that is the problem, right? The so what is the problem. Because it snowballs. Your behavior snowballs. We dictate your surroundings, and that dictates your culture, and that dictates your country. And I don't need to tell you where we are as a country many years later, right? We know. And so I think it starts from that sense of, can I fix me and what is around me? And the moment we realize that, and I'm not going to specifically say youth, I'd say all Sri Lankan people, the moment we realize that, then we will have a space of, developing everything and seeing development. So I wouldn't say it's not just self-leadership that we lack. I think it's, and I say we because, all of us are part of it. I think something that we lack at the core is just that understanding of how much power you have for, creating everything that's around you, how that snowballs kind of thing.
Yeah, it's sort of a self-realization as well, because we should know what we are doing around, no matter the culture, no matter the place surrounding. It's always good to do the best with a quite often action with a realization. Okay, so let's connect self-leadership with the workplace. So I want to know now, the youth, we are getting into different workplaces, and the workplaces have different surroundings. So I want to know, in your perspective, how is this practical version of self-leadership will help out the youth in terms of their work surrounding? How it will level up in their growth process?
So having been a corporate trainer for the past 13 years or so, something I've realized is that we will hear from organizations who say, hey, these people need a session on time management, or these people need a session on decision making, or you come up with different things, right? But if you go back to the core of it, if you go back to the core problem a lot of the time is understanding, is this individual capable of understanding their pain point or their problem point? Mm-hmm. And are they disciplined enough to try to find a solution for it? Because in today's day and age, a lot of tools exist in the world. And you can't acquire those tools. Maybe you need some experts to tell you how to put those tools into action. But if you go into a space of growth and development, you will see there's lots of people who have self-learned. Even with the passion, even with the but they have figured out a way to self-learn. Now, this aspect of self-learn, whether it's a skill, whether it's a gap, whether it's learn to solve a problem, is something that we're not super used to doing. We're very used to somebody else telling us, okay, if you do this, you'll get this. Or if you follow this culture, if you follow this, we're very used to that, right? Mm-hmm. So I think if you go to the workplace and you show a sense of taking ownership and trying to grow yourself without waiting for somebody to tell you, somebody to grow you, then you're going to grow really fast, right? If you're going to do some self-learning, if you're going to start asking and being proactive for things, you're going to grow really fast. But a lot of the times what happens is, we are busy because you're going to have a big workload and there's more time to learn. I completely understand that, but then understand that you will probably be doing 5, 6, 7, 8 years down the line, the same thing, the same problems, in the same situation, and feel pretty, terribly crap about yourself. So if you want to grow, then you've got to, figure out ways to expand your capabilities. And if you're able to self-do that without waiting for, somebody to do it for you, then you're going to grow very rapidly.
All right. Shooting out this last question. So this came out randomly. I want to know how self-leadership would be in terms of technology, because technology is taking up a big space in our lives, specifically the youth. So how would it be affected, or it would be more impacting self-leadership in terms of youth, actually?
So I think technology, it gets a bit of a bad rep because people start making it an excuse for their lack of discipline. Or so many distractions. I'm on, social media all the time, and my notifications are going off. Come on. I understand that if you're on a diet, having food in the fridge right in front of you does not help, as it might help not have that food around. It's same with the tech, right? But the thing is, you can't escape your phone anymore. It's basically a part of your life. So the solution is now, it's not about keeping it away from you. It's not about running away from it, but it's about how much I'm disciplined. So I'm not going to think about, oh, technology is a bad thing. It's hindering one of these things. That it doesn't work. We can't pick and choose what aspects of technology need to grow and what aspects need to not hinder us. We just need to learn to grow our discipline. Because if we go back to the time before cell phones, people had other excuses. If you go back to time before there was TV, they had other excuses. Like, people always have excuses. Exactly, it's the threat. Homo sapiens are really great at it. Sri Lankans are better at it. And so that's any excuses. So I think that tech question is like, tech is going to grow in every possible way, as it should. That's how human beings grow. That's how we grow as civilizations, as communities, that's the only way. And if you can just learn to discipline yourself and learn to how, tech is like, if you take even apps, there are timers, right? There are wellness apps and like how much time to spend on social, what's your screen time bit. There are things you can do. You can put timers and apps switch off and tons of things. But you don't do it because, it's just easier to blame a notification. It's just easier to blame other things, right? There was a time people blame, no, I can't because my friends are like this. My friends are always going drinking, so that's why I drink. My friends are always, but now it's like, are you blaming your phone?
Yeah.
And then you say the phone gets controlled over blame something else. AI. Because of AI, I think we'll find a way to blame something. But the core thing is, all this external crap doesn't matter. Can you control this? That is all that matters.
Exactly. I think that was one of a kind podcast and also a very fruitful session. And I think the youth actually quite got a sense of self-leadership and that everything begins with oneself. So I want to thank you, Mr. Fahad, for joining us with this 7th episode of AIESEC in Sri Lanka. And yes, I need to thank IFS for partnering up with us for these amazing podcast episodes. So this is the end of a spectacular, insightful podcast, and we will be joining with you all with another episode soon. So tune in.